Hello Fanatics, welcome to Diamond Painting Fanatics. I am Cindy and I hope you are all well. If you are new here, hi. If you like all things diamond painting, awesome. Please consider hitting that subscribe button and share your journey with me. I love interacting with you guys. Life has been quite hectic lately. I am running a spring flings and Easter things diamond paint along from the 20th of March, which starts tomorrow. Yay! Yeah, I'm currently working on my Diamond Art Studio Sharpie, and I thought we could get back into our true crime episodes. I have missed doing these. I know you guys love them, so I thought I would kick off. I'm going to try and do it every week, but with the pandemic and the kids being home, and it's just been mayhem. And the event, of course, that has taken over my life. But I am here today to talk about the unsolved, or is it, case of Scott Guy. And this is a really tragic story. So I shall talk about the case and then we can have a chat at the end. But please remember to leave your thoughts down below. Okay, so it is early morning on July the 8th of 2010, and Scott is in his car, or ute as they are called, on his way to work, and he works at his parents' dairy farm, and he's driving along quite happily, normal routine that he's been doing for years. Working on the farm was central to Scott's everyday life. He's 31, I should add. He is 31 years old, and he's always dreamed of being a cowboy, and it's typical of kids to dream of being cowboys, but this never left him, and he even left his parents' farm to go round up cattle on horseback in another job. So it was always his dream job. But he's back now and he's working at his parents' farm. He's fast approaching the gates of the farm and they are locked. And this is very, very strange because at no time ever were the gates locked. So Scott is obviously going to have to get out of his vehicle to open the gates. And then what happens next is a complete mystery, but was it? So different sources claim different things. So now Scott has been forced out of his vehicle to open the gates. But what he didn't know is that the gates were deliberately closed in order to make him get out of the vehicle, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. So essentially it's a trap. So he's stepped out and opened the gate, and shots have been fired basically, and before he even knows what's going on, he has been shot dead. He was shot in the throat and the face and hit in the arm, all at close range with a shotgun. The killer fled the scene, leaving wavy boot prints. He was laid there for over 2 hours before neighbours came driving up and obviously saw Scott laying there in blood and immediately contacted the police. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to the beginning, and Scott grew up on the dairy farm with his parents and 3 siblings. He has a brother Callum, a sister Nikki and a sister Anna. When Scott came back home to work on his dairy farm after rounding up the cattle, a guy called Ewan MacDonald. Ewan was working at the farm. He had worked there since he was 16 on the Guy family farm. He moved up the ranks and ended up managing the dairy operations. And when Guy came home in 2003, he was put in charge of calf rearing and feeding the cows. They both ran the farm together. They end up running it together and, making a substantial sum of money together. Everything on the outside looks fine. They get on well together. They are working well together. There's no real conflict, but within every family, we know there's always conflict. So Ewan ends up marrying Scott's sister, Anna. There's going to be quite a few names bandied about, so I hope we can keep on top of it. So now he's married his sister, Anna. So now he's the brother-in-law. And Ewan and Anna end up having 4 children together. And Scott was Ewan's best man at the wedding. So everything from the outside looks peachy, and they're friends and they work together. It's all looking peachy. In 2005, Scott meets Kylie, falls in love and gets married, and they had a son called Hunter together. And at the time of this tragic end of Scott's life, she was pregnant with their second child, and he was looking forward, to being a devoted dad of 2 and working his dream job. He had it all going on, and he was just brutally murdered. And Kylie turned from wife to widow within minutes, really. That whole thing just changed everything. Okay, so the investigation is where we're going to next. And naturally, farm workers, they come and they go, and they come and they go. And one such worker was called Callum Bow. He was very good friends with Ewan, and they spent a lot of time together. And they got up to all sorts of things, which I will come back to in a little while. They come to light. So the Guy family were seen as a well-to-do, a well-established family, well-known in and around Fielding. So when the police come in, and we all know how that works, they look inside out. So they're ripping apart the family and, trying to find clues and things, and everyone is paying really close attention to ins and outs of the Guy family. Shooting of Scott rocked. It shocked and it rocked, and not only did it happen in their community, it happened to the Guy family. So it built up a lot of interest. Scott's parents, which are Brian and Joe, they own the farm. The farm was originally owned by Brian's father, so Scott's granddad essentially owned it first and passed it down to Brian. Granddad was alive when Scott was murdered, but he passed away 3 months later. But now we're getting to the tension in the family, and this came down to the ownership of the farm. Family members had shares of the farm, but so did Ewan. Scott was the oldest of the Guy children, and he fully expected to inherit the farm. In 2008, he said as much in a family meeting, but his parents rejected it because there's shares. And Scott was told that if he wanted to own the farm, he's going to have to buy everyone out. Inside of the Scott and Ewan friendship, animosity is building because they each want it and each don't want to sell, and each Ewan believed that Scott didn't pull his weight around the farm and he did far less work for pretty much the same pay. That's how he felt about it. He also criticised him for being disorganised all the time. And then Scott moved his family onto the farm to live. So that would be Scott, Kylie, Hunter, and obviously she's pregnant with the second child. He's moved them onto the farm and Ewan hated it. So in May 2008, Scott's parents transferred 400 shares, equal to 20% of the business, to Scott and his wife Kylie, along with Ewan and Anna. So then it seemed that everything was calming down, everyone's got an equal share, because they're not giving it to Ewan so much, it's them. He's married to their daughter, so they're sharing out between the children and the grandchildren and stuff. In June 2010, Scott and Ewan went on a trip together, like a dairy conference, and when they came back, they seemed to be getting on better, whether they cleared the air out there, whether it was just a facade to put the family's mind at rest that everything was fine. It's hard to say, really. Come back from that conference, it would be 2 weeks later that Scott was shot dead on the driveway. So the landlord came across the body and phoned the police, and then he also phoned the landlord, to which the landlord looked at the body and then called Ewan, and Ewan and the police arrived at the same time at about 7:30 in the morning. And Ewan was sounding frantic and he was calling Scott's dad to try and tell him, and the dad couldn't understand a word he was saying because he was so frantic, and it took a little while for the message to get across, to which obviously Brian, well, he must have been absolutely shocked and heartbroken all at once. Police are now scouring the scene looking for evidence and clues. Apart from obviously Scott's murder, the only other strange thing was that there were three chocolate Labradors. Puppies were usually locked in a cowshed on the farm, and they were being sold, and they were missing. They could not have escaped on their own, so no one in the family or anything to do with the family had any idea what happened to those chocolate Labradors. So now they're talking to people and digging up information, and they've come across some interesting information about Ewan and the farmhand Callum Bow. They often got together on a night throughout the years, and they went onto the property of other farmers. In one instance, in December 2006, Callum and Ewan trespassed on the property of Craig Hawkins, a successful deer farmer who made velvet from the antlers so he didn't kill his livestock. He had 16 stags in an enclosure that he could see from his house. On this particular night, he's looked out the window and he's seen that all the stags are standing together, like huddled, like they've been spooked or scared or something. So he's gone out to check. There were only 14 of the 16 stags in the enclosure. Ewan and Callum had poached the stags, and Ewan cut off their heads and put the bodies in a large hole that he had dug at the Guy farm. Sadly, this wasn't the only time that Ewan and Callum had poached from other farmers. They are eventually caught red-handed. The farmer who had lost his stags came up with an agreement, a gentleman's agreement, if you like. He was going to let it go, but they were to return the stag heads and formally apologise to him, which they did. But this did not sit very well with Ewan at all. So one night, Ewan is enraged and he returns back to that farm, and he, in a fit of rage, he beat one stag to death, and that wasn't enough, so he beat another one to death, then another one, then another one. All in all, he beat to death 19, and he probably would have carried on had he not been so exhausted, physically exhausted. He also went on, because that wasn't enough, he sabotaged a large milk vat, and he emptied out thousands of dollars worth of milk. Ewan and Callum Bow used to call these nightly outings missions, so I'll refer to them as missions moving forward. They just went on. These missions happened over years, like not just once or twice. It went on for absolutely years. Ewan is a decade older than Callum, so he's clearly the influencer and the one withholding all the rage. It seems to me that Ewan preyed on the kind-heartedness and the forgiving nature of the farmers, and then if he did get caught, he just went back and made it 100 times worse. And what can you do against that kind of vindictiveness, really? So investigators into Scott Guy's murder end up visiting Callum Bow. Callum came off as a very impressionable man, and he'd known the Guy family from a very young age. Callum had a very tragic past. He was in the car with his dad, travelling along, and an overloaded timber truck and killed his dad, and Callum suffered severe injuries to his head, which in turn caused permanent brain damage. And a short time later, Callum's mum, who was distraught by the death of her husband, suddenly, the anguish that had landed on Callum with his brain injuries, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away before Callum's 9th birthday. So he had met the Guy family and become very attached to them over the years. And then when Ewan turned up at the farm to start working there, he befriended Callum. It started off, they used to go hunting together, and then obviously it evolved into their missions, as they call them. Callum told police that on one particular mission, they didn't go off to poach any animals or anything. What they actually did was burn down an old building on the Guy's family property, and that was where Scott and Kylie were to build their new house. It completely threw them off, like, who would do that? And he would have been involved in those conversations. It's like, oh, who do you think it was? And he's sitting there going, oh, I don't know, it could be the deer farmer. Do you know what I mean? Scott and Kylie did proceed. They did continue, and they built their house where they were going to build it, basically. And of course, again, that's enraged Ewan because, like, plan failed, so to speak. And then they decided, yeah, this isn't happening, so we're going to smash it up and we're going to graffiti paint it. A brand new house. It had been built and Ewan had smashed it and graffitied it and made it uninhabitable. Kylie became not only upset, but she became anxious and paranoid, trying to work out who would do such a thing, and they have a young child as well. Ewan is married to Anna, and when all this came out, she could not believe that this is what these two were getting up to. And she did say that they were, they acted immature, and yeah, she had absolutely no idea. And this is her brother and sister-in-law. So I can't, again, it's so complex and so many people's emotions, not only the damages that he's been doing to all these other farmers and stuff, but to his own family. I can only imagine that this left Anna torn up and angry, and where does she put that rage? Because this is a guy that she's married and had 4 children with, and it's against her whole family. So I really feel for Anna. Once the police have found out all of this sort of information, and yeah, they found out all this information. The police have found out all this information, and Ewan is arrested. He's been arrested and he's being questioned, and he lied all about the night missions that he was getting up to. But then he found out that Callum had been talking. He admitted his guilt. And then he turned around and he said, look, I've made plenty of trouble. I've caused all these issues, but I am not a murderer. And then he said that whoever the murderer was is a psycho. But the police were not convinced, and they charged him with the murder of Scott Guy. So there we go, an open and shut case. No, it's Thriller Thursday after all. So now we're at the trial. Okay, so the judge decided to lock away all the night missions that he had been getting up to with Callum Bow. He decided this because it was going to make him look guilty without actually hearing the facts of the murder that he was standing trial for. Insane, if you ask me. He wasn't going to release the information until the trial had concluded. The police have gathered up all the evidence they possibly can to build up a case. The police believe that when Scott went to the meeting where he thought they were going to say, yes, you can inherit all of the farm, they said this, quote, might have signed his death warrant. Ben van der Kolk was determined to make Ewan pay the price for taking Scott's life. So he painted a picture, and this is how he transpired it in court. So he's saying that Ewan got to the farm knowing that Scott was on his way. He's closed the gate to force Scott out of his car so that he could shoot him. He proceeded to shoot him at close range using the farm shotgun, a double-barreled shotgun. Ewan was wearing size 9 dive boots at the time of the murder, which left distinctive boot impressions in the dirt at the scene of the murder. He then rode a bicycle to another part of the farm where he commenced with work. Ewan at some point had taken the 3 puppies and killed them to make it look like a robbery, and that whoever killed Scott did it to get the puppies and sell them off for their own. There are a couple of issues with their version of events. Police had excavated quite a few areas around the farm, looking for evidence of anything. Ewan had, in his night missions and everything, he always buried everything. So they thought, well, he's not going to change that, so he's going to bury the evidence or stuff. So they proceeded to dig, and because Ewan was clueless that Callum had told the police, he wouldn't have had any reason to redig or move it or anything, because he only found out once he was arrested, so he didn't have time to move anything. They were looking for the dead puppies, for the shoes, for the shotgun or the shells. They were looking for anything that could tie him to it, and they found nothing. But because of their really strained relationship, it could come across as intent, and along with witnesses, they kind of thought that their case was going to be strong enough to hold it all together. But what they didn't realise is that they were up against a criminal defence attorney who had a reputation, a very, very good reputation, for getting people off their crimes. His name was Greg King. He was very well known for his closing arguments. He was very, very well sought after by anyone because of his reputation in getting people off. So he presented fatal flaws within the case that they had stated. The prosecution claimed that he was shot with a double-barreled shotgun, but 4 nearby residents heard 3 shots, and that would not have been possible with a double-barreled. You'd have to reload. And he also called upon witnesses that had said that they saw Ewan at another part of the farm at the time of the shooting, which was at 5 a.m. So he could not have been at the crime scene. Greg also said that the police had ignored other evidence, such as the tyre marks were not investigated that were around the scene. There was a unknown vehicle that was parked on the same lane at the time, and that was not looked into. And there was a criminal within the area at the time who committed crimes with a double-barreled shotgun. So they kind of dismissed it, and they're sort of saying that they became focused on Ewan. A pack of cigarettes was also found, had matched the criminal that they were dismissing. There was a man that come looking for Scott a couple of days earlier, and he was an unsavoury kind of character. He stank of alcohol and was just a bit, you'd want to look into him for sure. He turned up at his house a few days before the murder, and none of this was even looked into, and remains unidentified. And then Greg was saying that there was so many footprints around the murder scene, and they focused on the one, not all the other ones. In the end, Greg King done his job and the case fell apart. But Ewan wasn't just free to leave. Now they had their eyes on him for all of his missions that he had been getting up to. It's all criminal activity, so that's what they are kind of looking to arrest him for now. And if you remember correctly, he'd kind of already admitted it because Callum had already told them, so then he admitted it. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison for all the night missions. So, I just want to quickly talk about the aftermath of this tragic crime. And clearly it has not been solved. Technically it's not been solved. So, I just want to talk about the aftermath of the events that happened. Anna divorced him. Yay, Anna. She moved on. She did find love, and she had 2 more children, moving on the best she could. So yay, Anna. Scott's family still are trying to come to terms, not only his loss, but not having anyone punished for it. I mean, it's truly heartbreaking. They just want justice for losing their son, and for Kylie and her children. Brian and Joe, Scott's parents, wanted their farm to continue in the family for generations, and they loved seeing their children and their grandchildren raised on the farm. They could not bring themselves because of the pain and the heartbreak. They put the farm up for sale, which is really sad because they hoped that it would go on through the generations as it had been doing. So sad. Kylie then had her second son. She has found love again and has another child with that person, and I wish her the best too. Ewan was released in 2015 and has remained free and has remarried. Now, Greg King, this is part of the story that choked me up. I mean, it all has, don't get me wrong, but this part of this tragic doesn't end here. Greg King was the one that got Ewan off. Greg King, 4 months after the trial, he was found dead beside his car in Wellington, New Zealand. He had committed suicide. There was a handwritten note written by Greg. He was speaking about how horrible he felt. He was exhausted, depressed, seriously unwell, and he was haunted by the dead from his homicide cases. He went on to say that the trial he had been working on a week prior involved yet another unnecessary death. Greg's wife, Catherine, has come out and she had said that after giving the closing arguments in Ewan McGregor's case that he had a huge breakdown. So there you go, guys. What do you think? Did Ewan McGregor kill Scott? Did something else happen? Do you have a theory of your own? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys for spending time with me. I hope you've enjoyed. That's not the right word. But as true crime fanatics and Diamond Painting Fanatics, thank you. And I hope you got some of your projects done. And I shall see you very, very soon, guys. Thank you for spending time with me. And I will see you in the next one. Lots of love, lots of hugs and sparkles to you all. Bye.